Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday.
Good morning.
Knitting with Nancy.
Welcome to Knitting with me. Today we're going to go over a few things. I want to show new colors of a yarn we debuted last week, but all the new colors came in, and I want to talk about it because it's a great year-round yarn and something we'll show some patterns with next week of that. But I'm hoping most of you are at finishing your fog cutter sweaters. So today I really wanted to focus in on seaming. So this is more about technique and how you do it, and for you to gain your confidence to make your sweater look really beautiful. It's the last step, and if you've done all your knitting really nice, you want to make sure you seam it so it looks good and not handmade. So here we go. I'm going to show you some of my tools that I use for it. We have, and call us for these please, so these are called chibis. Funny story with the chibis, those who know me back east, I went one year to New York for Vogue Live, and my husband was watching the store. It was the first year I had it. And he's calling me and saying, "What is a chibi?" And I had to try to explain to him that chibis are darning needles, and it's just what Clover, or what they call their product. So it was quite funny. He had no idea, and he's searching my accessory wall trying to find chibi. We also have from Brooklyn Haberdashery, and these are really pretty sets, and I want to open this one up too. This set, and I took out one. I use this, what's called the Darning Needles 5 knitting needles. It's $16. And the reason why I like this is I like these bent tip needles. But it also comes with 3 other needles. They're all blunt tips, so you don't split your knitting, and then the eyes of the needles are different sizes. So I'm going to pull this one because I'm going to use this. But to show you, for larger knits, for chunky, you could use this on an Aran weight, but it's really for the bulkier yarns. If you notice, the eye of the needles are much bigger. But again, here's my favorite, that bent tip. And again, these are $16. So give us a call. I love this company. I also love it because it's got a nice holder. Not that these don't, but I'm all about the tactile feel. So here is Annette's finished sweater. I stayed up quite late last night to make sure I was prepared for today. So she's very excited. I wanted to show sleeves all done, whoops, wrong way, done and bound off. We talked last week about measuring the back in reverse stockinette.
So, look at that. Even
again,
the stitches.
So, what I want to tell you before you seam, and this is kind of my pet peeve with a lot of knitters, is I would like you to darn in all your loose ends. And I'm going to show you how to do that momentarily. And why. A lot of people like to leave really big tails, or like on hats or mittens, to use that to sew it in. But if you use the thread, oops, I thought I left one out for you.
Maybe
it's on this one.
There you go.
If you use the thread at the bottom, if I can find it here, or the top, as part of your seaming, if you need to take it apart at a later date, and if by accident you cut your seam stitch, what you have done is actually cut your knitting. So to avoid that, I always use leftover yarn to seam with, and new yarn. You always want to pull out longer than what you need because you can trim it back. So first today I wanted to show how to darn in an end. And notice I left quite a long tail. Normally I leave about 7 inches for it. Because this was cotton, I did leave extra. So the way I thread a needle is I fold it in half, over the needle, pinch it between, and then put it through. And I think, as I mentioned once before, usually needles, and it's going to be hard for Val to get up close, but one side is slightly flanged out, or it feels a little rougher. And the idea of that is that you can push the needle through. I don't know if these bigger ones. So I don't know if she can see that this side has a curve here, and if I flip it over, it does not. It's going to be hard to see on the video, but one side is smooth and the other side kind of stands straight up. And again, that's so that you can help. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
But the majority of needles have that. So before I get into the seaming, I want to show people, I bound off, and can you see that this is a big stitch here? It looks kind of funny. Yeah. And if I just weave this in, I haven't corrected that end stitch. That looks a little big. And it's really easy to correct. I'm going to take my darning needle, and I'm going to come to the loop below, and I'm going to pull it in through and tuck this down, and see, I pulled it a little taut here, and now I can go right back up to the top.
And then at the top is where you're going to weave your ends?
Well, I'm going to start weaving, but can you see I tightened that right up?
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to do the very edge when I weave, so I'm going to come back down through 2 bumps to the rows below, and I want to pull this back out because I'm on the right side, not the wrong side.
Whoops.
You want to go to the wrong side, come through that cast bind off, and if you've noticed, I've come in from my edge and now if you see those bumps, I'm actually just going to come in and pick up these bumps going down, the sides of the V's. And it's nothing special. And I'm going to pull it through. Do not pull tight because I don't want to see it on the other side. And you're going to come down about 2 inches. And in cotton, the thing about cotton is it doesn't necessarily, like wool, stick to itself. But even with wool, I've come down roughly 2.5 inches. And notice how I've tugged on it a little. I don't want this tight. And now I'm going to turn it and go right back up the one next to it. I'm going to come over a stitch, and I'm going to do the same thing back up about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And I'm going to pull that through again. I'm putting a little tug on here, and the reason why is when I block this and I open it up, I don't want to lose my thread. Now, why did I come back up? The reason why I came back up is to put an extra lock in. It's cotton, but I do this even with wools. And then I can snip pretty close. I've left probably about 1/8 inch. But as you wash this, this tail could come undone. But it hasn't changed my main part of it that I've woven in, and I can weave that back in later if I have to, before I'm going to lose everything. Any questions from anybody? Okay, so on to seaming, and there's two kinds of seaming I want to show today, and I started it. Let's open this up. Now I seam from the right side facing me. This pattern calls for a mattress stitch. One, I don't necessarily do a mattress stitch. It's like a zipper, and when you do a mattress stitch, you're actually pulling up in between that V, that bar that's in between the stitches, so it's easier to see it here. I'd be pulling this up so that when you pull it, you're kind of zipping the pieces together. But I find my tension for me is not as even, and it gets a little puckery sometimes, and I don't care for how it looks. So I'm going to put my right sides, forget the sleeve for a moment. I have right sides together. I know I want this detail, and I want this to look like I've knitted these two together almost. So I do what I call a ladder stitch. I'm making rungs. And I'm coming up one side, and I'm going to go right up to the next stitch, straight over, and pull straight over. And again, I'm not pulling tight, but I've put a little tug on. I'm going to come up one and over one and pull. And I'm just coming back and forth. And so what I'm doing is actually putting these V's together so it looks like a row of knitting. And it is that easy. So this is my favorite way to seam. And if you notice, I like to hold it over my index finger so that I can see the next two stitches. Now, if you notice, this stitch is a little big. And if I don't want that, it looks kind of ugly, I can tuck that under and come below and pull that bar with it even and come straight across. And I'm going to almost like audition it and see, do I like how that looks? And if I do, I'm going to continue. But if you don't like how it looks, stop, undo it. It's easy to pull out, and do it again. The whole idea of seaming is that you like what you are producing and coming back and forth. Because ultimately, you're wearing this product. Do I have any questions on this type of seaming?
Nope.
Boy, you guys are quiet today again. Now that seaming, when I come and do my sides, and I know they're curled, and if you recall, I said I don't like to block. You can gently steam if you want.
So can you show how you start? Because that's always one that I struggle with, the concept of how do I start so that that
Perfect.
thread doesn't
Great
get,
question.
you know,
Thank
how do
you.
you knot it? And do you knot it?
Well, you don't knot it. So
as a quilter, I'm like, I should knot this.
if I know that this is my seam from here to here, I know I have the right amount of stitches, I'm going to take 2 to 3 times more than what I know I need.
Of string, okay,
Of-
gotcha, of yarn.
Of yarn. And notice I've matched the color.
So you don't want to seam with hot pink? Although, could that be cool?
Well, it could be because you could see it. So I'm going to come on the inside, and let's take this front for a moment. And I am going to start here. Notice I'm not on my edge. And I am going to start weaving in the same way I did before. I'm just picking these loops up in the back because I'm going to weave in that end so I don't have to worry about it later. And notice I've left a
Tiny bit, yeah.
a tail here. I haven't trimmed it. And the reason why is if I end up wanting to pull it out, I know where the tail is.
Sure.
And I'm going to come down about 3 inches. Or a little less. Because now I have to get back to this corner. And I'm going to come up and weave it in. So notice what I've done is I've set,
You've set this,
I've already set it so I don't have a loose end to worry about later. I've stretched it out. Again, you can't see it from the front. And I'm going to come right up to this corner now. And from the right side, I am pulling it through that very last stitch.
And then you'll start from there and go.
And now I'm going to come back to here. And notice there's a little bump here. I'm going to bypass that and come just below it. That was my bind off.
Because then the bump will get tucked inside.
Tucked will get inside. But notice here, I've started once. And I'm going to come through it again.
Aha, lock that baby in.
And lock it in. And I've come to the stitch just below what I just did on the reverse side.
So is this your shoulder seam again?
This is my shoulder seam.
I was just trying to figure out where you're at.
And now I am ready to start going back and forth. That's one.
And you do one at a time, right? You don't do the like when you were putting your yarn in, you did like several and then pull.
Correct.
But with this,
you go one at a time. And look here, there's a bump here. Can you see that that's the one side of the stitch and the other side is right underneath?
There it is, yeah.
So you want to pay attention so you do get the right one. And yes, I only do one at a time because I want to make sure I'm coming straight across, pull, and then straight back.
So you said there's 2 different types of seaming you do on this sweater?
Yep. So here,
this is ladder, correct?
That's my ladder, what I call a ladder. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to stop and show you the shoulder seam because that is what's different. And if you notice, I have started in the center. So how did I do that and why did I do it? And let's spread this out so you can see. I have the sweater. Again, right side's facing up. And once again, I did this backwards.
Oh no!
It was 11:30 last night.
Hence,
so watch.
The teacher makes mistakes. Here's how she pulled. This is how you
But
unseam.
how you unseam, if you notice, I'm just using my needle and I can spread this out.
Ripper required.
No.
No seam ripper.
And it doesn't matter. So this is a good technique to show you. And to save time, I'm going to just flip it and go to the other side.
Okay.
But yes, teacher was too tired last night. So that's something.
You would sew this.
You're sewing. Well, it's again, the directions say sew to your first short row.
No, but I mean you would sew this before you
Right,
add
and it tells you to sew the shoulder seam first. And then with the right side facing up, silly me, I am going to take another piece of yarn 3 times bigger than what I need. Can you see how long this is if I drop it down? There they are, my scissors. So it's much longer.
Yeah.
Why do I do that? I seam from the center out. What does that mean?
One side and then the other side?
I am going to come to where I want to start, right on my center seam of my shoulder. I am going to pull half the yarn through.
Oh, you're so smart.
Okay? So now I know I have enough to do the right side, or the back and the front.
Gotcha.
Now I'm going to take, and this is the hardest part here, we're literally just going to fold my sleeve in half and find that center. Now if you were doing the cap of a sleeve, so you had a bell on top, for instance, it's the exact same thing. Fold it in half, find the top of that curve, because the top of that curve comes to here.
Okay.
I am going to come through. Now this is what's different. And let me turn it for the wrong way for a moment, which is what I was showing. Can you see if you were stitching stockinette, you would come through that upper V. And this is the difference of a ladder. I'm coming through a whole stitch here. Because I want reverse stockinette, it becomes almost like the same thing of a ladder. I am going to come down that center bump and pull in. Don't pull too tight or you're pulling your other edge. And now, if you have little safety pins, I use in our flight of stitch markers, these are the open stitch markers. So I sometimes like these to also hold. I want to make sure this corner here lines up to my edge here. Because this is what I have to ease in. Okay? Does that make sense to people? If you were doing a bell-shaped, you have on your sweater, you would have normally bound off some and come up. That edge of that sleeve matches that edge down here in a bell curve. This is a drop shoulder, so it does not. It's only from side to side, and I have to make sure this fits into here. So the next, I'm going to
Get your finger in there again.
get your finger. I'm coming up the next bump, and I'm coming straight up to the bump inside here.
Inside that.
If I
bind
do,
up?
yes, because look what happens if I do this, I'm pulling.
Okay.
The next bump is here,
And it doesn't pull.
and it will not pull. And watch what happens when you pull this up. I'm going to come down in between to this next bump. You can also come, when I say in between, you could take the in between stitch. It works, if I was doing to a stockinette, I might do the in between. I don't need to here. I can use the next bump up, pull gently, and again down to the next bump here. And you might want to stretch this a little and put another one halfway. And you can use the safety pins ones, but I know that I have to ease this to this. Mm-hmm. I also don't want to see these on the sides. So I'm coming up, if you noticed, let me get my hand under here. I am coming up and bypassing, and I am using these guys here and what's in between below.
Okay.
Because I don't want to see my seams. And the same thing here. And I have the one below. If I take this one, look at how big that is. Mm-hmm. And I don't want this to stretch out. And here's my next bump here. Now what happens, and can you see how that lines up nicely then? Mm-hmm. But if I have to ease this, if this is bigger, I can come into my next bump here and come back into the same one I just came out of.
Aha, to ease it.
To ease it in.
Or vice versa, whether it's
or vice versa.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, that's cool.
And what that does, and I'm going to come do this middle one then just to see how it looks. But what that does is it allows you to ease in where you might have had differences in lengths. So remember I said I don't like blocking first because that sets it? I couldn't do this as easily if I had already blocked it and set it. It might pucker. Where now, when I open this up, it doesn't pucker. And the whole idea is we want it to look good. So once I finish here, before I weave in the end, I am going to come back and do the same thing on the other side, lay it out, and make sure I like it.
Mm-hmm. And then you would do the sleeve / side seam.
Right. So let's pretend I have this done right to this edge here, and it's all sewn. I then can fold it in half.
We're pretending, right?
I am. And if you notice, I now have my straight seam here.
Yeah.
I am going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to put little markers to ease it in here to here. Remember when you come down here, these bumps and these bumps must match.
And that's the end, because you don't...
Because if you recall, right? That's the end. This stays open, but I want to make sure, if you notice, one is longer than the other, so I want to make sure this matches up. I'm then going to come halfway between and put in another safety pin, like our little safety pin markers. You can use these. Some people like those big clips that the quilters use. I'm not one for those. I like something that I can remove quickly too, so that does. Now, let's talk about doing the side seam. Once again, I am going to cut thread really long for one and really long for the other.
And you're going to start in the
and I'm going to start in the armhole. And why? Because I want to make sure it lines up down. If you start here at the edge and start working your way up, you might get to the armhole and suddenly be off. So I want to start right where I know I can match everything up. Same thing, when you come to seam these two edges, you're going to do the exact same thing. We're coming from the bump. And notice I've bypassed that last edge stitch right here because I don't want to yank it out. I want it a nice clean.
So you're coming in. Yeah.
I'm going to do the bump, and then I'm going to come in between the bumps. And what's really nice is they're going to line up almost bump to bump. So you can go, if I have my fingers through here, and again, it's that ladder. I'm going to come through that inner bump here, up, and straight over, up and straight back.
Yeah.
Any questions?
No, everyone's very quiet, very intense.
Perfect.
Students.
Very
Yes.
intense students. So that is seaming. Call me if you have any issues. I do want to see how you're doing in your projects so I know where you are in them. And before we finish today, I want to show you the new colors of the Arno yarn that just came in. And we couldn't be more excited. Oh, you know what I forgot to show? When I block, and I do a complete wet block, I use our board here to lie it out on. Now, you are not going to need on this sweater blocking wires, but I recommend you having these in your toolbox, as well as our blocking pins.
So would you use the pins for the sweater then?
You don't need to. For most part of this sweater, you will not need to use wires or pins, because a lot of times sweaters, once you wet them and you open them up, they will lie exactly the way you want them. If not the case, if you need to open this up more than what you can get, then yes, but then I would use a wire with the pins because you don't want to pull out little bits and pieces so it gets kind of bumpy.
Yeah.
So again, these are my favorite tools I'm showing you. Don't forget to have them in your knitting box. Arno yarn, the new colors, and I'm going to lean up so Val can see them. Look how beautiful this tweed is. And this one has 3 colors because it has the gray, the kind of cream, and a blue, the navy, kind of a tealy blue. And then these 3, which to me just, they're so yummy. And if you look, this one is kind of marled of the beige. So they go really pretty together. And new sweater patterns are coming in from Barocco in a new book. We're going to talk more. Next week, I'm going to show you some more techniques on that. And then we're going to start another knitting project, maybe a shawl. So if you have some ideas of what you'd like to see, please let me know. Leave me a comment. I try to answer everybody in the evenings. I do want you to know, if you go up on our website, which is Stitchin Post without the G.com, you'll see all our new classes. And one of the new knit-alongs I'm doing is the pitch sweater. It is a Ravelry pattern. It's more of a sweater coat. What you'll be really excited to see is we'll have 3 yarns doing it. New to us will be Ultra Alpaca coming in next month, so I'm very excited about that. That will be an in-house knit-along, but I know we're going to try to do something because some people asked if they could do it online, and we're talking about that now, Diane and Val, to see if that's possible, because I'm going to be continuing with different knit-alongs on Wednesday. So have a great day, everyone. Get out, get some sunshine, social distance, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for stopping by, everyone. Have a
Bye.
great day.